Good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Baghurst, and this morning's guest, I should say this afternoon because he's in England, Dr. Paul Turner. He is a high-performance coach and has a specialty in resiliency. Paul, thank you so much for joining me. If you wouldn't mind, just give us a minute or two explaining how you got to the position that you're in today.
A minute or two, Tim. Good to be with you. Thank you for the invite. Well, it's a long journey, starting out in business, learning around leadership and management, and obviously led through to a career primarily in financial services through the 80s and the 90s and the virtual delivery of business services. But during that journey, I found out that the best results, that the best leaders, the best managers, they were great coaches. And that led me to do a PhD in coaching. And early 2006, I then moved out into business consultants. And it was during that business consultancy phase, which I'm still in today, that people started to come to me from sport and asking me for help. And so that took me into pro sport and the great opportunity really to work with elite athletes.
We talked just before the show about the crossover between business and sports and how similar they are. Can you talk a little bit about, what things you work on in business that transfer over into the sports world?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of work in business, and primarily it's about companies wanting to increase their leadership bench strength. And a piece of work that I've done, Tim, is around looking at the high performance protocols, which I've worked with for many years in business, and comparing them to the high performance protocols in sport. And the big finding really is, probably not surprisingly, is that they are very similar. So if you take, for example, self-awareness, emotional regulation, goal orientation, self-confidence, positivity, a learning mindset, and diligence around the need to obviously set out a daily, weekly, and an annual timetable. All of that shows really that success, whether it's in business or sport, is surprisingly similar.
One of the things that I was really interested in having you on the show to talk about is this resiliency, because in sports, it's very, very visible, right? An athlete can have a really bad day. A coach can have a really bad day, and how they respond to that is quite important. And some may struggle with that. Some may struggle with injuries, as an example, where they may be away for months at a time, trying to get back to where they were or even higher. Emotionally, you go through a lot when that happens. And what strategies have you found really work for those who are struggling to have that resiliency in their arena, whether it be sports or business?
Yeah. I always work really from diagnosis. So I always work from the point that if we're going to work together, then this is the way we're going to do it. Because I'm not really particularly very good at this reactive coaching. I need to work from an evidence base. And I think it's the right thing to do, because how can you know the journey to where you want to get to if you're not sure where you are at the present time? You've got to get that grounding. So whether you look at all the psychological models, whether you look from Maslow through to some really latest thinking on this from an associate of mine, Matthew Critchlow in the UK, resilience, really all the evidence comes out that resilience can be defined and can be identified in primarily specific ways, and resilient people draw their strength really from 6 areas, 6 resilience factors. Now, once you know those factors, you can assess and help a person identify where they're resilient. Once you've done that, you can then pinpoint where you need to work. And then that reactive stuff can come in.
Okay.
The techniques can come in once you know, where this person is in terms of their benchmark around that.
You said 6 things. Now I'm asking, what are those 6 things that we need to know?
Well, it's surprisingly, you will not be surprised by this, Tim, but most of the great learning is unsurprising, isn't it? It is very true. You read in the papers about the studies that come out after years and years of research, and people go, yeah. And it is there, isn't it? Okay, so the six principal things really. Firstly, is I put some names to these, but they are my own names. But raison d'être, and that's around purpose. That's meaning. It's having a core sense of being. It's not just about winning. It's why are you in sport? What is your passion and belief around this sport? All of the great athletes have that. It's not about the gold medal is the objective. Mm-hmm. Purpose is not an objective. So identifying an underlying purpose as why you're getting up in the morning, why you're working so hard as elite athletes do is critical. That's the first one. The second one I call Radiance, and this is around positivity, optimism, confidence. It's that, Tim, it's that half glass, half full situation. Now, resilience is not personality. Personality generally is pretty fixed. Yes, you can, if you work really hard at it, fine-tune your personality, and life changes, big life changes can impact on it. But personality is generally over a 10 to 15 year journey, more or less fixed. Resilience can be changed. It can change over 2 or 3 months. One person could put up with some huge shock to their life, but can you really put up with 2 or 3 on, straight away after? So resilience, and that's where positivity comes in. Just because you might be, a half empty glass doesn't mean there aren't ways that you can improve your positivity. The third one is radius. Radius is the people around us. What support do we have from teammates, from family, from colleagues? What's our team? Now, when we look at the elite athletes today, they've got a team, haven't they? It's a team around them. They call themselves team, and that is where that radius comes from. The third one is rapport, and this is I think a little bit about what you were talking about in terms of when the pressure is on. Is it a case of can they manage those emotions? And that one is really where I do most of my work. It's actually helping athletes to actually manage themselves in the moment. Very often we react. The fifth one is results. People who get results generally are pretty good at managing problems. And
it's a lot easier when you're successful, right?
Well, there are ways of managing problems, and some people are not, just don't understand how to manage problems. So there's structures, there's evidence around how people manage problems well. Managing problems is pretty big, and that's up there. And finally, we've got reality, and the reality is basically not usually a problem for elite athletes, because that's about physiology. That's about lifestyle, nature, nutrition. But not always, of course. As we know, we've seen many stories in the past about elite athletes who actually really have lost the plot around that area of physiology. But that's generally one I don't tend to work in very much, because there are other experts in that field who do it much better than me.
Now, one of the challenges that a coach has, maybe a team manager or a team owner has, is recruiting players or hiring players, right? Buying players in some sports. And resilience is obviously a big component of whether an individual is going to be successful or not. Is there a way to identify somebody's resiliency without coming in and, Paul comes in, here are these surveys, fill them out kind of thing? Are there any ways that, or questions that you can ask that help to determine whether somebody has that resiliency built in? Because if I'm a team owner, I don't want to spend millions of pounds or dollars on this athlete who I find crumbles in the big pressure moments. I want to know that they can be successful. Yes, you mentioned it can be trained, but it's a lot easier if I can already have that person mentally strong to get through those problems. But I need to know whether they're resilient. Are there ways to maybe have indications of that?
Oh, there's so many things there on there that you could go. I mean, I prefer maybe helping someone identify a potential player who maybe at the moment isn't resilient, but has a potential, because then you're going to get them a lot cheaper than the millions of pounds, but they're potentially going to end up there. So it's a very interesting one. I do work with this. I mean, a couple of clients, which in the past I've worked with, in rugby union in the UK. You know this, Tim. Rugby union is a big sport, and helping academy players going in, doing assessments on academy players coming through, and interestingly, the guys I've worked with are really now on the cusp of international recognition. So really helping players from the start is really useful. And another area from just examples is I've done some work with a basketball team. Basketball's pretty big in America, I think, Tim. And but I've worked with Manchester Giants here, and I think some of your listeners might know Nick Nurse. And he that's where he actually won a championship when he coached in England at Manchester Giants. So the key thing about this, I prefer to do psychoanalysis. I prefer to do diagnosis. And because if you do that, it's not my opinion. This is evidence-based assessment. And I'd always say, I'd be very open with the players. This is what it's for. It's not about benchmarking where you're at. It's actually identifying where you need to improve. And yes, of course, what you see, of course, how do you actually see resilience? You see it in the moments of pressure, and you see that, and you also see, people who aren't resilient in the moments of pressure. But for me, the passion is not finding a ready-made player off the shelf. It's actually saying, right, okay, what's your potential? How can we develop it?
Now, that's your passion, but I would also counter that with a lot of coaches and managers don't want to get the development player who maybe improves in 5 years' time. They want that player now. You talked about identifying resiliency in moments of pressure. Do you encourage coaches and those who work with athletes to provide those moments of pressure in training to help identify and also prepare that athlete for when those big moments come?
Yeah, it's a great insight, Tim. Really, I think this word training, I don't like it. I really don't like it.
What's an alternative?
But I really know it is the term, isn't it? But it's because of what you've led me into, really, is very often people see training as, it's routine. And what you're suggesting, and I would endorse, is coaches should look at ways in which the pressure is maintained. And all the great coaches do, as we know. There is A training session for elite coach is tough. You're going to turn up there, and day in, day out, you're going to do that. So yes, there are ways, and I think it's getting and creating those situations that, whether it be in football, taking penalty kicks, or it actually going through constantly that routine. And as we know, many coaches go to the extremes on this to actually get that absolutely as near as you possibly can to the real moment. And you do that enough times, you actually get that rigor and routine, and it does help you cope. But that is more the physical side. The mental side also needs that approach. So many athletes, I think it's changing now. We know that there's a different approach to this now, but many athletes. I've had athletes approach me and say, "Paul, I'd like to work with you, but I'm not prepared for that. Can we have a confidentiality agreement, etc.?" And I just say no, because why would you do that? Why would you want to not suggest that you have a resilience coach on your team? And I think that is changing, but I think it's really important that it's an open relationship, and you can work within that zone.
Well, there's definitely a stigma attached with anything that might be considered a weakness, right? And you actually raised this, and it was a question I was going to ask, which is one of the challenges we have when we talk about mental performance is it's hard to measure. So if for example, I have my son goes to a kicking coach, in 3 months' time, the kicking coach says, "Hey, look at your son. They can do this and that and that." And I see evidence of it. Yeah. The flip side is if I send my son to Paul as a resilience coach or a high performance coach, as a parent, where's the evidence, right? Show me that he's tougher or mentally stronger. It's very difficult to do. And yet we talk so often in sports that mental toughness and grit, resiliency are so important, yet we don't train it very much.
Yeah.
Do you see this as well in your work, where it's kind of I don't know about this because we can't necessarily see the benefits immediately?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you've got to get it. And as I say, the people I work with obviously do get it. But we mentioned seeing the end result, and resilience or non-resilience can come out in many ways. I follow really in the footsteps of great psychologists and great coaches, and my aim is really to be aware of what's going on in today's world in that area. People like Steve Peters, Dr. Steve Peters, and the chimp paradox puts it in an amazingly a great language. It summarizes the things that go on inside us at the moments of pressure. And from that, you can actually build techniques. So one of the key techniques, one of the things that happens in sport, high pressure sport, very often is we can get distracted. The coach gets everybody set up, and then suddenly the referee or the umpire gives a bad decision. And then the emotional churn means that the player's focus is on the referee, the line judge, and it's gone. The moment is gone, yet they're carrying with them that. And then, of course, what happens? They get penalties, and the game is lost. And we see that so many times, don't we? So I think it's situations like that. The coach will come to me and say, "Look, my players are getting, they're just not staying cool in the moment. They're not got a cool head." So coming around techniques such as affirmations, very powerful, very simple, very powerful affirmations. talking to the player, talking to the coach, saying, so when I'm doing one-to-one with a player, I'll say, you got this game coming up, and how would the coach, what would you want the coach to say to you after that game? What 3 words would you want them to say about your performance? And then I'd ask them, and from that we construct, when they come off that court, when they come off that pitch, what do they want to say about their performance, and whether that's dynamic, or whether it's energetic, whether it's focused, whether it's disciplined, whether it's creative, whatever it is, we build affirmation into the mindset. We work on techniques so that they actually are getting these words. Things are created, Tim, things are created twice. First in the mind, and then in reality. If we don't express them in our mind, it's not going to happen in reality. Generally, okay, people win the lottery. I get that. But very usually, it is about setting yourself up to win. So affirmations is a really key start. You then, for a number of athletes, can then really start to get powerful around visualization. If you've got your affirmation, you can then bring in visualization. And of course, you can do quick and easy visualization, or you can expand it and really get in the zone on it. But taking those affirmations through the visualization process, and anchoring the affirmations and visualization together, very powerful, as you know. I mean, I always remember, I came from business, Tim. One of my seminal moments in learning about sport and coaching came from Carl Morris, who is an exemplary coach, primarily golf coach, and coached many an elite golfer. And I always remember the story. He, at the time, was working with Louis Oosthuizen, and we're going back now 2010. And Louis was struggling in the British Open golf competition at St Andrews, and he just couldn't get focused. Do you play golf, Tim?
I have.
Yeah, that moment on that tee. And it's for us, but even for the pros, that's probably the moment when the pressure gets the highest, because you've got all the gallery around you. And he was just struggling with the focus. He knew what to do, but the cameras were going off, the crowd were whooping, and he couldn't get it back. So he worked with Carl, and of course, out of that came the anchor, the 3 words, and the anchor. And the anchor was a red dot, and the red dot was on his golf club. So every time he set up to take the shot, he saw the red dot, and he knew what the red dot meant, and he went in the zone, and he won the Open, even though he was struggling for 2 of those 4 days. So very powerful.
We do have a question that somebody posted I want to share with you. It's from Ardian, and he wants to know a little bit about team versus individual resilience, and how can an individual's improvement or maybe lack of improvement affect an overall team's resilience. Can you talk a little bit about the differences there, and also maybe the fact that you working with an individual on the team, but not the team as a whole, and so it's almost like you're working with a piece of the puzzle, but you don't get the rest of the puzzle to make it a perfect picture. That's a challenge as well.
It's a great question. Because it's difficult. It is very challenging. Firstly, I tend to work with a lot of individuals, so they'll be boxers, they could be golfers, tennis players. I work with Maria Sanchez, who lives up the road from you. America's a big place, 3 or 4 hours. She lives in Florida. Not playing a lot of tennis at the moment because of the current situation, but it is very focused when you are working with individuals, and you can be very bespoke. However, when you think about teams, what normally happens is the coach may come to me and say, look, I'd like you to work with this person. And so you then go off into your one-to-one area. When a coach comes to you and say, come in, work with the team, then it becomes very much around team ethos. It becomes very much about building the team, trust. First of all, we go through it. What's the purpose? Mm-hmm. What is the big idea for the team? What's the team ethos? Where are the team values? What are we committing to? Find out what everybody's prepared to commit to. Get that mantra that all the great teams have, which is, that it's one team and we know what that team stands for. So you tend to work, Ardian, around more team commonality areas. When you can get a bit deeper, which really is very powerful, the individuals share their resilience highs and lows. And therefore you build the trust. Trust is very powerful. And you also allow the other team members to really help and support that team player. So, yeah, I think you can work with individuals in the team, and I do. But coaches, I've worked with Danny Byrne from Manchester Giants pre-season. Coaches tend to bring me in maybe before the season starts, set up the purpose, set up the expectations, set up the standards, and give them a more generic presentation around the things that they could do to help their resilience.
It's a little bit frustrating, I imagine, though, because I've been in your situation where, come in, give the team talk, provide some education, get them thinking, oh, yeah, this is good. This is good stuff. This is good stuff. Bye now. And then there's no continued development of what you're working on. And it's almost like maybe a token gesture of this is important. You all need to listen to this. We're going to get things set up at the beginning. But as we know, if you don't continually train, what happens? Performance declines. And so how do you get coaches or an owner or someone like to buy in and say, you know what, this isn't just a gesture. This isn't just a quick fix. We need long-term sustained development, just like we do with our physical training.
Yeah. That, Tim, you've been there, and it is, it's very frustrating. When you're given the first gig, you deliver, you get a great result, and then you just have to hope that they understand this needs to be continued. Obviously, the recommendation and advice is it is, and I think it's very easy we're all of the same ilk. It's very easy when the pressure's on to go back to doing things how you used to do them. Mm-hmm. And that's what generally happens. Change, doing things differently, trying new ideas. People will turn around to me and say, well, look, Paul, I've been doing this. I've not done so bad. I've been doing this for several years. But then I would say, so are you at the ceiling? Have you achieved the top of your potential? Now, some just don't get it, and we're all human. We know life. Sports people are no different to any other persons that we know. Some people are happy hitting mid-range, keep the pressure at a certain level. Others want to extend themselves and go through it. I don't have an answer for that, Tim, to be honest. I think it's just part of life. It happens in business. It happens in sport. And you just have to value and treasure when you get a moment where a coach really believes in you and says, Paul, I want you on the journey, and let's have a year together, and then let's review it at the end. Very often it's let's have a month together and we'll see what happens. And I can, it's a challenge. I wish I could help people on that one, but it's a very difficult one.
Well, and I appreciate your honesty in that it is difficult. And you know, I would argue, and one of the reasons why we have our program here is that a lot of coaches and people in sports just don't understand how valuable it can be. And part of our job is to not only provide some training in it, but also demonstrate how valuable it is. And so hopefully over time, some of these coaches coming in won't be well, I've heard about this, but I'm not too sure, but I've learned about this and I know we need it. So that's one of our goals, obviously.
Yeah.
Last question then, just to conclude, when you think about resilience and what you've worked on with your coaches and your athletes, what kind of advice do you have? Maybe one or two things for those coaches and athletes looking to get to their ceiling.
I think that every team really that is in professional arena, and arguably, I work, and there are arenas where you get amateur and professional crossing over, but any team that's really seeking, any coach that's really seeking to achieve great things with their team should really be aware of the psychological dynamics that are going on within that team. So the first thing I would say is you really should be onto this. The second thing is don't think you can do it yourself. There's two problems here. One, you might be qualified to do it yourself, which is probably very rare, but it is possible. But the point is you can't be two roles. You cannot be working with the kind of matters that a resilience coach, a psychologist can work with and manage the team and coach the team. So lots of coaches, I think I work with coaches who I actually coach coaches, and that is very powerful. I going back to Ardian's point, I think one way to actually help with a team approach is to coach the coach, because then you're doing it through the coach. Someone like me comes in, initially an outsider, and but if you're going through the coach,
Well, looks like we lost Paul. I don't know what happened. He disappeared. Well, it looks like that concludes the conversation with Dr. Paul Turner. Just a reminder, if you have questions for him that you weren't able to get answered in the show, you can send him an email. Email is paul@paulturner.co.uk. For those of you listening to the podcast, Paul is his first name, Turner, Turner, hr.co.uk. paul@paulturner.co.uk. Well, on behalf of myself, Tim Baggers, thank you so much for watching. And of course, Paul Turner, it's unfortunate he disappeared just like that, but we're just wrapping up. Just a reminder, if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, be sure to do so as we provide interviews each and every week. So until next time, thanks so much for watching.